Welcome to MacStories Unwind, a weekly review of everything MacStories and more. Today's show is brought to you by Discourse. I'm John Voorhees, and Federico Viticci is here too. Hey, Federico.
I'm here. Hello. Hi. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I'm a little punchy, I think, because I've been doing nothing but thinking about macOS Monterey for so long that I'm ready for a break, Federico. I'm ready to go with a full-on 100% iPad Pro lifestyle because as much as I love this M1 iMac and I've really enjoyed using Monterey too, I've been sitting at the same computer ever since the first week of June. And normally during the rest of the year, I mix it up. You know, I'll use my iPad Pro out on the patio, or I'll sit on the couch, or I'll sit in bed or whatever. But especially at this last stage where I'm editing, taking screenshots, and final testing things to see if things have changed with the betas, I really have to be in front of that iMac all day long. And I'm a little tired of it at this point.
Yeah, I can imagine. I'm really looking forward to that macOS review that you've been working on. So that's coming soon on MacStories, and
very soon. It's all in Apple's hands now, the timing. But yes, it's almost finished. It's just kind of the final changes and edits, and we'll see if there are any more betas. We're on beta 10. Can you believe we got another beta this week?
Beta 10. Wow. I think, they're probably going to do the RC next. There's not going to be beta 11.
Right.
It'd be fun to have like macOS 12 beta 12. That would be kind of funny. But I don't think we're getting past beta 10 for beta versions. I think we're going straight to RC and probably getting RC1 and RC2. I wouldn't be surprised to see that.
That's probably true. I think we had 10 last year too. I was looking back, and I think it went a full 10 last year as well. All right, Federico, why don't we dig into the stories on the site this week? And the big news this week was that you released Apple Frames 2.0, which is a reworking of your shortcut that frames screenshots in hardware frames. What did you do to change this? What's different about 2.0?
Yeah, this is a big new version of Apple Frames, and it basically consists of a major rewrite of the entire shortcut. And I explained, I don't want to get into the technical details about this, I explained some of them in the article, but essentially I realized that I wanted to take a look at this code that I first wrote years ago, 4 years ago. This shortcut has been, being maintained for a long time. And what's new in this version is an entirely new installation flow with support for localization. So Apple Frames now comes in 7 different languages. And that was necessary because there are some instructions that you need to follow when you first install the shortcut. Now, I try to make it as simple as possible, but basically, Apple Frames now stores all of the graphical assets, the actual frames that are necessary to frame screenshots, outside of the shortcut itself. They are stored as a giant text file containing all the encoded information for the frames that is stored separately as a text file in your iCloud Drive account under the shortcuts subdirectory. That was necessary for a couple of reasons. First, due to, really the reason is one, which is performance issues in the shortcut editor. Used to be that all of these giant text strings were stored inside the shortcut, and that has always made Apple Frames quite challenging to scroll and open and share because it was such a heavy shortcut. And performance was always kind of terrible inside the shortcut editor. When you were scrolling all of these dozens of text actions, it wasn't great. And it wasn't easy for people to open the shortcut and inspect what the actions were doing and scrolling the shortcut. And also, I wanted to add even more devices. I wanted to support more platforms. I wanted to bring back support for Mac screenshots. And so I figured I need to add this external dependency, which is a file that you download directly from MacStories. You do it once, and then it doesn't require an internet connection anymore. So you just do it one time up front when you're installing the shortcut. It's all like a guided process that you can follow. You pick your language, which you can change at any time, of course. You download the database file, and that's it. Then you can start using Apple Frames as always. But this time, it's going to be faster. It's going to be lighter. I fixed a ton of bugs when it comes to image metadata, renaming images, It should be faster to combine multiple images together because it's stripping all of the metadata from those images so that they are smaller. And there is support for the entire iPhone 13 lineup. So 13 mini, 13, 13 Pro, and 13 Pro Max, the new iPad mini, the base model iPad, the 24-inch iMac, the M1 iMac, and the M1 MacBook Air. And with this structure, and I should mention, of course, for iOS and iPadOS devices, both orientations are supported, as always. And there is a new action to save framed screenshots to files. Takes advantage of the new files integration in iOS and iPadOS 15. And like I mentioned, it's faster, localized, lighter, so I can share, you can open the shortcut and it doesn't hang, it doesn't stutter anymore when you're scrolling the editor. And it gives me, like this new foundation, it gives me a proper structure to iterate on Apple frames more quickly. I'm already working on Apple Watch Series 7 integration, bringing back some old devices, if possible. And of course, I can be ready more quickly for upcoming devices that I can support using Apple's official frames.
Nice. And when you say it's a big file, it's actually, I guess in the grand scheme of things, this outboard file in iCloud Drive isn't very big in the sense that it's 30 megabytes. But 30 megabytes of plain text is enormous. It's a lot of characters. It's a lot of text editors can't even handle that kind of size when it comes to text files. And I mean, I know it would be interesting to look at your iOS review and see how many kilobytes or megabytes that is. I bet it's no more than 1 or 2 megabytes at the very most. And just to give you an idea of how much text that is. But it works incredibly well, and it is fast, and I'm very grateful that you finished it before I had to finish my Monterey review, because there are going to be lots of framed shots of the iMac. So that's look forward to those. Yeah, it's been really fun using that. All right. We have an event next week, Federico. Do you have any idea what we're in store for? This, I don't know what it was about this. You and I have been anticipating an announcement for 10 days, 2 weeks, something like that. And we had a post ready to go, and we're kind of watching every day around, well, it's like 11 or 12 my time when that stuff usually gets announced. And each day would come and go and no announcement. And then finally, this past week, we got an announcement. And I actually just happened to close Twitter right before it was announced. And I was almost caught a little flat-footed, but fortunately, someone alerted me. So I found out about it. But I guess it's MacBook Pros, AirPods 3. I don't know what else. Maybe a Mini, maybe a Mac Mini.
Maybe a Mac Mini, maybe a display. I mean, that's my risky pick from Connected. Maybe a Mac Pro. I saw Mark Gurman tweet about some promotional messages that Apple has been sending out as promoted tweets or email newsletters. I don't know what it is, but they're teasing big things on Monday. And I don't know, but is a MacBook Pro or a Mac Mini a big thing? That seems like a sort of like a reference to an iMac or a Mac Pro. I mean, a Mac Pro is a big thing compared to a Mac Mini, or a display is a big thing. AirPods, also rumored, are not a big thing. So I'm curious to see if this teaser message hints at something. I just feel like, is there an event where it's just a MacBook Pro and AirPods? Not really. So I think we should be expecting more on the Mac front than just, everybody's talking about the MacBook Pro, rightfully so, but I think we're going to get a little more than that.
I hope so. I don't really, I'm kind of due for a new Mac, and I'm not sure which way I would go on this. I've got a 2018 Mac Mini, so I don't know. It'll be interesting if we get both an iMac and a Mac Mini. I don't know which way I'll go on that. Maybe I think if we don't get a display, I would go with the iMac, because I've grown used to the 24-inch M1 iMac screen. It's so beautiful compared to the 4K LG display that I have. So I don't know. That's probably the direction I go.
Yeah. John, you wrote about Active Tab again. We mentioned this last week. It's a Safari extension on the Mac that sort of compensates for some poor design decisions on Apple's part in Safari 15. But now it's also on iPad.
It is. And we got beta 10 this week too on the Mac. And that changed the way tabs work on the Mac, which for the better. I mean, now the favorites bar does not sit in between the tabs and the content anymore, but it's still both on the iPad and the Mac kind of hard to tell one tab from another, or at least, I guess, more specifically to tell which one is active, especially if you're in dark mode, because the grays are somewhat subtle. And active tab draws a line underneath the tabs, so you know which one is the active one. And personally, I like the bright yellow color when I'm in dark mode because it does a great job of standing out and showing me which tab is active. So at first I thought when I saw that new beta, maybe active tab would be one of the shortest lived popular apps, because last I looked, it was in the top 10 of Safari extensions on the Mac App Store. But I think there's still reason to use it. And it's really nicely done, both on the Mac and on the iPad now. And it has more options than when I first wrote about it, because you can kind of tweak the way the color is displayed to your liking. It's got basically different filters for the color, and it shows up in a lot more circumstances, a lot more prominently than before. So it's just $2, and it's universal across the iPad and on the Mac. So definitely worth checking out. Federico, let's talk about the club. I wrote this week an extension column all about read it later apps. I've been thinking about this a lot lately because, Matter is now out in public beta, and the team over at Readwise had a big blog post a few weeks ago about what they're working on for a modern read it later app. And it's really gotten me thinking about my reading workflow and what might be in store for the future, since, it's been a long time since we had those innovative competitive years of Instapaper and Pocket, which was actually called Read Later, I think, originally.
Read it later, yeah.
Read it later, right. And it's been a lot of time since then. And in those days, there was tons of innovation in the space, but it's been pretty quiet for a while now. And I think it's going to heat up going into 2022, and I'm looking forward to it. So I had some thoughts about what would make my perfect reader app.
Nice, very nice. I wrote about reminders in two different ways. So I had a MacStories recommends for an application called Remind Me Faster. Now I don't wanna talk like I want to repeat the entire post here. It's basically like a mini review of this app. But all I'm gonna say is, if you're a reminders user, if you use the Apple Reminders app or system for things like a third-party client like GoodTask, if you're a reminders person, you need to have Remind Me Faster in your life. It's basically like a scratch pad to quickly enter reminders. And I wrote about how you can combine Remind Me Faster and its customizable UI with native smart lists in reminders in iOS and iPadOS 15. So go check it out, because it's really an excellent utility. And I hope that the developer sees what we wrote and, that they're working on updates to the app, because it's really, really nicely done. And I also had a tip about how to create a reminder with Siri and apply a tag to that reminder. Now, this is not supported natively by Siri, but I found a workaround, and in Weekly, I covered that workaround and I explained how you can also do that.
Very nice, very nice. This week on App Stories, Federico, we did a whole bunch of top tips for iOS and iPadOS 15. And we didn't exhaust that list. We may revisit our list in the future, and maybe we'll even add the Mac at some point. But this coming week, we're going to have a live episode of App Stories. We're actually recording it live in Discord for our Club MacStories Plus and Club Premier members, and then we will release it on Tuesday of next week to everybody else, because the event's going to be on Monday at, I think it's 5 p.m. Eastern. We're going to be live in the Discord. So if you want to hear the show live, want to ask us some questions, you can go to plus.club and join the club. And then you have access to the Discord. So I'm looking forward to that. It's going to be a lot of fun. We've done some live stuff recently in the Discord, and it's always fun to get the reactions of the members in real time.
Yeah, it's going to be super fun. This will be our second live App Stories, recorded live on Discord for members. We'll take some questions. It's going to be, sort of interactive. We're going to talk, me and you and Alex. We're going to talk about the Apple event. Then we'll take some questions from Discord members. We're going to share some first impressions of the announcements. It's going to be super fun. And of course, it'll come out before for App Stories Plus members and the day after for regular App Stories listeners. So go to plus.club if you want to join in on the fun and, of course, get access to a bunch of other perks for Club MacStories Plus or Club Premier.
All right, Federico, let me tell you about our sponsor for this episode and for all of Mac Stories this week, which is Discourse, a powerful, customizable, open source platform designed to facilitate civilized discussion for your community. They've reimagined what a modern discussion platform can be with tools that create and scale a healthy, vibrant, and fun place to connect with your customers, superfans, and teammates online. Toxicity and spam are two of the biggest problems in online communities, and Discourse has the tools you need to make sure that your corner of the internet is a civilized place. Discourse has great tools for theming your site too, so you can work with your own branding, and there's a developer API and plugin community that lets you extend Discourse too. Plus, your data is always yours. Discourse doesn't sell your data, and you can always download a full backup anytime. If you're ready to try it out, MacStories readers and Unwind listeners can get a 60-day, 100% free trial by using the coupon code SHORTCUT. I think they did that one for you, Federico.
Nice. Thank you, Discourse.
That's right. So go to discourse.org, use the coupon code SHORTCUT when signing up, and you'll get a 60-day, 100% free trial. Our thanks to Discourse for their support of MacStories and Unwind. Okay, Federico, before we do our Unwind picks, I do want to mention that out today on arcade is Tiny Wings, which is one of those classic games, right? That's a fantastic game, and it's out today. I think next week the NBA 2K is coming out too, but I got to say, the closest I've ever gotten to NBA 2K is that one demo they did where they showed off the sweat on the guy's forehead. You remember that during one of the events?
Yeah,
1 year?
That was a while back. Yes, I do.
Yeah, that was an older version of the NBA series, but I think there's a new one coming to arcade. Plus Tiny Wings, though, so check Tiny Wings out. I know Federico is chomping at the bit to tell me about a game that he's been playing, so I will turn it over to you, Federico. Tell me a little bit about your pick.
I promised this last week, and of course, I have been playing Metroid Dread on my Nintendo Switch.
Yes.
John, let me tell you just how happy I am that this game exists. Now, Metroid Dread is officially, I guess, the 5th installment in the mainline series of Metroid games. It sits right after Metroid Fusion, which is a Game Boy Advance game that came out in 2002, 19 years ago.
Wow.
So we had to wait almost 2 decades for a proper follow-up to Metroid Fusion. Now, Dread is a 2D old-school Metroid game, and it's just a fantastic game. Like, whether you are new to the Metroid series, you can play the game, you can catch up at the beginning. There's a sort of a very quick recap of the events leading up to Dread, but I also recommend, we're going to put a link in the show notes, there's an excellent, truly excellent, deep dive into the backstory of Metroid and the lore of the Metroid universe on Polygon by Maddie Myers, I believe.
I think it's Maddie who wrote it, yes.
Very good story. So go check it out if you want to brush up on the Metroid sort of lore and all the events leading up to Metroid Dread. What can I say? This is a beautiful Metroid game. The controls are extremely tight. So it was developed by Mercury Stream. They were responsible for the remake of Return of Samus on 3DS called Samus Returns. And now Nintendo, of course, also tasked Mercury Stream with making a proper brand new Metroid game on the Switch. The controls are tight. It plays like a Mario game. Incredible use of haptic feedback, HD rumble on the Nintendo Switch, which is actually useful and functional to the gameplay. For example, one thing that I love, when you charge your beam, you can tell that it's fully charged because of the haptic feedback. So it's not just an embellishment, it's actually useful to feel what's happening in the game. I see some people complaining that it tends to be a slightly more linear Metroid game than, say, Super Metroid on the Super Nintendo, or maybe even Metroid Fusion. Now, one of the main characteristics of Metroid and the genre that it inspired, called the Metroidvania. Metroidvania is a name that encapsulates Metroid and Castlevania, both similar games in some mechanics. And one of those mechanics is the so-called backtracking, where
Right.
the backtracking means that in this kind of game, and in Castlevania, you constantly acquire new abilities, like a higher jump or a more powerful beam or a more powerful missile, for example. And when you get those abilities, you can go back, you can backtrack, and revisit previous areas of the map, because now you can explore new areas, because maybe you can now jump higher and reach a new platform, or you can open a different door, or you can go underwater, those sorts of things. Now, in Dread, it seems to me like they wanted to make the game slightly more approachable. Essentially, they put a bunch of gates in some parts of the game that prevent you from going back. But I think this was the right decision for the Switch, for the kind of audience that the Switch, has. And I mean, this is a Metroid game that is coming out almost 20 years after the previous game. So it only makes sense, I think, to make it easier for people to catch up on the Metroid series. If you haven't played Metroid in 20 years, I think it makes more sense to have these kinds of structure. And also, another complaint that a bunch of people have raised is the lack of a proper soundtrack. And that I feel like I want to agree with. I wish that there was more proper music instead of just sound effects. Metroid Prime on the GameCube and Nintendo Wii had an amazing soundtrack. This game doesn't really have a soundtrack. It reminds me of Breath of the Wild in a way. There's not really a ton of music. There's more like ambient sound and atmosphere. But other than that, it's incredibly fun. The combat is tight. The controls are amazing. The story is fantastic. The atmosphere is incredible. It's amazing. I'm 11 hours in. I'm approaching the end of the game and the final upgrades. It's probably more than that, though, because it's a hard game. This is a difficult game, and I've been dying a bunch of times. And I had to try the major bosses and some of the mid bosses a lot of times to get those right and to memorize those patterns, to understand what I was supposed to do. But overall, amazing game. Super recommended. Even if you're new to the Metroid series, this is my game of the year so far.
Nice. Yeah, I was going to ask you about how hard it is, because I have heard that some of the bosses are pretty tough. And the other thing, I guess, supposedly, is that it looks fantastic on the OLED display because of the bright colors.
Oh, it does.
And the dark areas and everything. I mean, has that been your experience?
In some areas where it's totally dark because you have to restore like a power generator, for example, all you see is pure black and Samus's visor and weapon, arm cannon glowing in the dark. It's a beautiful effect. It's very beautiful.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that sounds fantastic. Well, I have a very boring pick compared to Metroid Dread. Mine's an app. And I don't know if I've actually even recommended an app before in Unwind, but this is an app called TweetShelf. And TweetShelf takes the place of, what was the name of that app that used to pull all the articles from Twitter? I don't know why I'm blanking on this. Nuzzle, that's the one, right? So it's a little bit like Nuzzle, and what it does is it aggregates links, articles, books, movies, podcasts. It has a whole bunch of different categories, and then of course it has an all category, and you can set up the settings so that it only shows you things that have been linked by a certain number of people you follow. So I set mine to like 2 or 3 or something like that. So once it hits that threshold, I'll see it in TweetShelf. And it's a pretty nice way to kind of get a sense for what people are talking about, just the way Nuzzle was too. There's a paid version of it, but I've just been using the free version. I think the app is a little rough around the edges here and there, which is why I haven't really written about it and why I haven't really committed to pay for it. But it has been getting updates, and it is definitely better now than it ever was when I started using it, which was 2 or 3 months ago. So worth checking out, especially if you want to stay away from Twitter a little bit more but still get those links that people share. It's a good way to do that. All right, Federico, that's it for this week. You can find the two of us over at MacStories.net. Federico is on Twitter and Instagram, where he's at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees. JOHNVOORHWS. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.